I said no to lending my car, so my parents took it anyway. Now they want me to lie for them. Hi, I'm Theo, 29, and I can tell you the exact moment I stopped being the good son. It wasn't when my parents lent out my car without asking. It wasn't even when my uncle wrecked it and ghosted me. It was the second I found out they'd filed an insurance claim in my name without my permission and listed it as stolen. Yeah, stolen by my own family. Let me rewind. I'd just gotten home from work, stomach growling, brain fried, and I was mentally debating between frozen lasagna and doing something deeply reckless with hot sauce and eggs. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Attached, a photo of my car mangled and half hanging off a highway barrier. Underneath it, a message. Sorry about the car. Things got a little wild. No name, no context, just that. I didn't even get to react before a second notification came in, this time from my mom. Hey Theo, don't freak out. We let Uncle Mark borrow the car for the weekend. He needed something reliable. I sat down on the kitchen floor, just sat, because my brain short-circuited in that moment. Like, okay, maybe I was on a prank show. Maybe Ashton Kutcher was about to walk out of my pantry with a camera crew and tell me I was being punked in 2025, which would be very on-brand for my life. But no, it was real. Mark, my dad's disaster-prone little brother who thinks oil changes are a scam. The man who once backed a rental truck into my old apartment mailbox and then blamed the mailbox. That Mark had driven my car, into something very solid at high speed. And my parents? They were worried about insurance. Not me, not my job, not the literal felony-level fraud that was unfolding in real time on my screen. The first call I made was to my mom. She answered on the second ring, her voice chipper like she was mid-latte. Oh, honey, relax. Mark's fine. That's the important part. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, did you ask me before giving him the car? She paused. That pause? That wasn't guilt. That was calculation. Well, we assumed you wouldn't mind. You weren't using it that weekend. And right there, sitting on cold kitchen tile with my cat judging me from the counter, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. In their eyes, nothing I owned was really mine, and nothing I said ever really counted. But this time was going to be different. I didn't go nuclear that night. I didn't scream or throw things or type out some big family group text manifesto. I just stood up off the floor, walked to my desk, opened a spreadsheet, and labeled the first column things I didn't agree to. Line 1, letting Uncle Mark drive my car. Line 2, filing an insurance claim in my name. I didn't know what I was going to do with the list yet, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't letting it disappear. The next morning, I called my insurance company. I'd barely said my name when the agent asked if I was following up on the active theft claim. My jaw locked so tight I nearly cracked a molar. I asked her to confirm what was submitted, and she read it off like a menu special. Vehicle reported stolen. Unknown suspect. Owner unaware post-incident. I closed my eyes. I didn't report that, I said, and I didn't authorize anyone to submit this. She went quiet for a long second. Then her voice changed, slower, careful. Mr. Everett, can you confirm when you last had access to your vehicle? My parents took it, gave it to someone without my permission. He crashed it. And then I added, and I just found out yesterday that someone filed this claim pretending to be me. There was another pause, the kind that sounds like typing and liability fear. She asked me a few more questions, and I answered each one calmly, even though my pulse was thudding in my neck. By the end of the call, she said they'd freeze the claim pending investigation, and I should secure my account access immediately. I didn't hang up and cry or yell or call anyone. I changed every password I had. That's when the text started. Mom, we need to talk.
You're overreacting. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. You seriously told them it was unauthorized? Come on, man. I thought we were cool. Cool. I stared at that message so long my phone screen dimmed. I'd never once said yes, never handed over the keys, never given even a casual shrug of approval, but somehow I was now the one making drama. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the claim confirmation email to myself and added another tab to the spreadsheet, Documentation, because something inside me had shifted, and this time I wasn't just going to ride it out. 2 days later, I got an email from the insurance company marked Urgent, Statement Request, Potential Fraud Inquiry. That word, fraud, it didn't even feel real yet, but there it was in bold at the top of a professionally worded message asking me to provide a formal account of events, including timeline, authorization status, and anyone else with access to the vehicle or my login credentials. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out of my apartment like the air had gotten too thick to breathe. It was raining, cold and slanted, the kind of rain that hits your collarbones no matter what direction you walk. I didn't care. I needed space. Because if this got worse, if they decided I was complicit or that the claim was suspicious or that I hadn't done enough to prevent it, I could be the one flagged, penalized, prosecuted for a crime I didn't commit because my parents thought it was easier to lie than to admit they'd messed up. I got back home and called my mom. "Did you file the claim?" I skipped hello entirely. She didn't deny it. "We just needed to take care of things. You weren't responding. You pretended to be me." That's not how we saw it. I nearly dropped the phone. "There's only one way to see it, Mom. That's fraud." She sighed like I was being dramatic about a parking ticket. "Theo, it was an emergency." "No, an emergency is a medical situation. You covered for Mark." That's when my dad got on. "It's being handled. Just let it go. Insurance will sort it." I sat down at the edge of my bed, phone pressed tight against my cheek. "This could screw me over for years." "Not if you cooperate," he said flatly. It clicked right then. They weren't just trying to clean up a mess. They were counting on me to stay quiet, to smooth it over, to take the hit like I always did. But they'd overplayed their hand, and something in me wasn't bending this time. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't even flinch at the consultation fee. I laid it all out. The unauthorized use, the false claim, the stolen identity angle. He didn't sound shocked, just disappointed on my behalf. Best case, they drop the claim and you walk away clean. Worst case, you're named in a fraud investigation. But if that happens, we'll be ready. I walked home from that meeting calmer than I'd been in weeks, because for the first time, I wasn't just reacting, I was preparing. I didn't hear from my parents for 5 days after that. Not a text, not a call, not even a passive-aggressive email about family values. It was eerie, like the eye of a storm had settled over everything. Except I knew better than to think it meant peace. It meant regrouping. On the 6th day, the silence broke. "Dad, let's meet, Sunday, just us, no drama." I agreed, but I set the terms. Neutral ground, public place, and absolutely no Mark. He didn't respond to that part. We met at a diner halfway between their place and mine. The kind with laminated menus and that one ceiling fan that's always too loud. My mom waved like we were old friends meeting for brunch. My dad gave me a nod like we were business partners negotiating a deal. I didn't sit right away. "Before I join you, I need to ask, did you access my insurance account again?" My mom blinked, feigning offense. "Of course not." "You're sure? Because I got an alert. Someone tried to reset my password."
They looked at each other. My dad's mouth opened, closed. Then he said, "We were trying to check on the claim, that's all." "You're not on the claim," I said. "You're not me." That's when my mom snapped. "Why are you being like this, Theo? We're trying to help." "No," I said, sliding into the booth slowly. "You're trying to control the outcome, and you're mad I stopped letting you." Silence. The waitress came, took orders we barely touched. I stirred my coffee until the spoon clinked like a metronome counting down something inevitable. Then my dad leaned in, lowering his voice like we were plotting a bank robbery. "Mark's scared. He's worried he could lose his job, maybe more." I didn't flinch. He should be. You don't mean that. I absolutely do. My mom folded her hands like she was praying. This could break the family, Theo. No, I said, this won't. What you did already did. That's when my dad dropped the big ask. We want you to revise your statement. I stared at him. You're asking me to lie. Again. No, my mom said quickly, just soften it. Say you didn't remember clearly. Say you didn't know Mark had the car until afterward. Which would be a lie, I said. They said nothing, because we all knew it was. I stood up without touching my food, left a 20 on the table out of habit. Next time you want to meet, I said, bring a lawyer. My mom's mouth opened in horror. You wouldn't. I haven't, I said, yet. As I walked out into the bright cold air, something in me felt lighter. Not better, not resolved, but anchored. They'd spent years teaching me to keep the peace, and I'd finally decided peace wasn't worth the cost if it meant lying for people who'd throw me under a bus to protect a man who couldn't even say sorry. The real shift came 2 weeks later when I received a thick envelope from the insurance company. Actual paper, which felt serious in a way email never quite does. Inside was a formal notice. The claim had been denied. Not paused, not under review, denied. The reason? Material misrepresentation of events and unauthorized submission of false information. I read it 3 times just to be sure I hadn't misunderstood. Then I folded the letter, placed it in my documentation folder, and sat back in my chair with this odd, almost detached sense of satisfaction. Not joy, definitely not revenge, just truth, acknowledged officially by someone outside the twisted narrative my family had tried to spin. That same day, my phone lit up with a call from my dad. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I picked up. He didn't even say hello. They denied it, he said flatly. I know. You couldn't have waited? I laughed, quiet, humorless. Waited for what? For Mark to throw me under the bus again? For you to dig deeper into my account? You're being dramatic, he snapped. No, I'm being precise. He hung up. I expected another silence after that. What I got instead was a group message, first from my mom, then my aunt, then Mark himself, each playing a variation on the same note. We're family. You didn't have to escalate this. Can't we move on? Everyone makes mistakes. You've made your point. No one said sorry, not once. But what really froze me was the voicemail Mark left the next evening. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it, which for him wasn't saying much. Look, man, I know it's been messy, but this is getting into serious territory. I could lose more than my job if this keeps going. I don't know what you told the insurance people, but whatever it was, can you undo it? Undo it. Like this was a spilled drink. Like I hadn't been the one scraping together rent while riding the bus to work because he turned my paid-off car into a paperweight. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back into my email archives and dug up everything. Messages from Mark asking for a favor, screenshots of me explicitly saying no, my parents' first text about not freaking out. I compiled it into a clean, organized timeline. I labeled it, backed it up, sent a copy to the lawyer I'd spoken to weeks earlier, just in case. Then, for the first time, I told people. Not family, real friends. People who'd watched me unravel quietly in group chats and lunch breaks without knowing the full story. And their reactions? Anger, support, shock. A few even shared stories about their own families. Different details, same pattern. Boundaries erased, consent dismissed, loyalty weaponized. One friend, Lena, said it best. They're not mad that you're causing damage. They're mad that you stopped absorbing it for them. That line stuck with me. I wrote it down, taped it to my monitor. The next time my mom called, I didn't answer. She left a voicemail asking me to meet and sort things out like adults. And for the first time, I realized she didn't mean actual adults. She meant me pretending to be fine and them pretending nothing happened. But that version of me, he was gone. Instead, I sat down and drafted a letter.
Not emotional, not angry, just clear. I listed the boundaries they'd crossed, the consequences they ignored, and the conditions I needed for any kind of relationship going forward. Full repayment for the damage Mark caused. A written acknowledgement that I had not given consent. No access to my accounts, property, or personal information ever again. Any further attempt to speak for me, sign for me, or file anything in my name would result in immediate legal action. I mailed a printed copy to their house. No text, no warning, no preamble, just the facts. I knew what would come next. The phone would ring, the tone would shift, maybe guilt, maybe fury, and maybe both. But this time, I was ready for all of it. The voicemail that followed was almost impressive in its range. My mom's voice cycled through disbelief, sorrow, and indignation like she was auditioning for 3 roles at once. Theo, we're shocked, honestly shocked you'd send something like that through the mail, like we're strangers. This isn't you. This isn't how family works. We've always supported you, always. We made a mistake, fine, but dragging things out like this is just cruel. I played it twice, not because I needed clarity, because I wanted to study the structure. It was a masterclass in emotional inversion. We trespassed, but you were cruel. We committed fraud, but you broke the family. Classic. I didn't call back. The next escalation came via a mutual relative, my cousin Avery. She texted me one afternoon. Hey, just giving you a heads up. Your mom called mine crying, says you threatened legal action. What's going on? I called her instead of texting, told her the truth plainly, the unauthorized claim, the lies, the fake theft report, my refusal to eat the fallout anymore. Avery was quiet for a moment, then said, "They didn't mention any of that." "Yeah," I said, "that's kind of the point." That weekend, words started spreading, not from me, from them. Suddenly, I was withholding forgiveness, refusing to move on, punishing Mark for a mistake. Funny how no one called it fraud when they told the story their way. The shift, though, wasn't just in how people talked about me. It was in how I felt hearing it. I didn't feel guilty or confused or like I needed to explain myself to keep the peace. I felt solid, like my spine had finally calcified into something that didn't fold when poked. A few days later, Mark texted me one final time. "You happy now? You've turned everyone against me." I stared at it. Then I wrote, "No, you did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." No reply. I didn't expect one. The investigation officially closed the following week. My lawyer emailed me the summary. The insurance company wouldn't pursue charges because I documented everything and acted immediately. Mark, though, that was still up in the air. My parents never apologized. Not really, but something in their tone shifted. Less certainty, less condescension.
Like they were speaking to a version of me they didn't know how to manipulate anymore. It wasn't a victory lap. It was the sound of power being redistributed, and I had no intention of giving it back. Spring came quietly, which felt strange considering how loud the last few months had been. My apartment felt different now, not physically. Same mismatched furniture, same scuffed floors, but there was a kind of stillness in it I hadn't had before, a kind that comes when you're no longer waiting for the next boundary to be crossed. The car, surprisingly, was repairable. Mark had somehow managed to destroy the front end without totaling the engine. The body shop did their best. It wasn't showroom perfect, but it ran. I picked it up alone, signed the release forms, and drove it home in silence. No music, just the soft hum of tires on pavement and the occasional creak of a new bumper settling into place. I parked it outside my building, stepped out, and stared at it for a while. It looked like mine again, but it didn't feel like mine. Not yet. That night, I went through the last of the documents. I deleted old emails, archived the insurance thread, and removed my parents' access from every shared account they'd once casually assumed they were entitled to. Then I did something I hadn't expected. I wrote them a letter. Not a legal one, a personal one. It was short, just a page. I didn't rant or accuse or demand anything. I just told them the truth, that I loved them, that I always had. But love doesn't mean surrender. Love without respect isn't love, it's obedience, and I wasn't available for that anymore. I ended it with a sentence I'd rewritten 10 times. I will always be your son, but I will no longer be your cleanup crew. I didn't mail it, not yet, maybe not ever, but writing it felt like closing a door that had been open too long, letting in weather I was never meant to live in. A few days later, my mom texted, "We're planning a family dinner next month. Hope you can make it. No pressure." 2 words stood out. No pressure. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first message in my entire life from them that didn't come laced with obligation. I didn't respond right away, not because I wanted to punish them, but because, for the first time, they could sit in silence and wonder what I would choose. Because that was the real shift. Not just that I stood up, but that I stayed standing. I didn't go to the dinner. I thought about it. I even got halfway dressed once, shirt buttoned, shoes on. But then I sat down on the edge of my bed, looked at my reflection in the mirror, and realized I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for the story. Their story. The one where the prodigal son returns, everything's quietly forgiven, and the lie gets rewritten as a misunderstanding. I took off the shoes, hung up the shirt, stayed home. They didn't follow up. Not that week, not the next. That was the clearest proof yet that this had never been about reconciliation. It was about control. And when I didn't play my part, the scene simply didn't continue. So I built my own scene. I booked a weekend away, something small, a quiet coastal town with decent coffee and bad cell service. I drove the repaired car there. It still didn't feel like the old car, but it didn't feel like his car anymore either. It was in between, like me. I spent 2 days doing absolutely nothing remarkable. Walked along cliffs, ate fish and chips out of paper, slept like I hadn't in months. No calls, no guilt, no fixing. On the second morning, I sat outside with a cup of coffee and started drafting something in my journal. Something I didn't expect to write. Forgiveness. Not for them, for me. Because carrying the weight of their choices around like armor wasn't strength, it was residue. And I didn't want to be defined by how much damage I could absorb. I wanted to be defined by what I built after. I never expected justice. I didn't need Mark arrested or my parents humiliated at some family gathering.
I didn't even want repayment anymore. I wanted distance, clarity, autonomy. That's what I fought for. That's what I kept. When I got back, I boxed up the rest of the things I'd been meaning to return. A few tools still at my parents' place, some old books of mine that had been borrowed a decade ago. I didn't drop them off. I shipped them. No note. Just closure. I still talk to them sometimes. Polite, surface-level calls. Holidays, birthdays. Nothing deep. Nothing heavy. I keep my boundaries sharp, my expectations low, and my exit strategies ready. Because I learned the hard way. Some people don't respect a line until it cuts them. I'm not angry anymore, not constantly anyway, but I'm not naive either. They taught me early on that love was earned through silence, and I unlearned it by refusing to be silent ever again. This wasn't a revenge story. It was a return story, back to myself. And honestly, that's the best ending I could have written.